The question is that the motion be agreed to. Rino Tirakatni.
Kia ora, Mr Speaker. Tēnā koutou I rauranga tira mahuri noi te whare. Mr Speaker, I'm delighted to speak at the second reading of this bill in support of this bill. Today, sir, we're dealing with ngā Punawai o te Tokotoru, a grouping of three iwi of Ngāti Rangi Te Aorere, Ngāti Rangi Wewehi and Tapuika of the Te Arawa Confederation. So, one of the issues with omnibus treaty bills is that it doesn't really give members long enough to really get into the nitty-gritty of the bills in this chamber. But here we have three iwi, and but I understand that for expediency, the practice has been now to group the iwis together so that their settlements can move expeditiously through the House, and we're seeing that also in the case of my own electorate in the top of the South. So although that is the case, sir, it doesn't really give us much time to really get into the details, which I believe that these iwi do deserve. But having made that point, I will get into the submissions. And it was a pleasure to go up to Rotorua to listen to the submitters on this bill. In relation to Ngāti Rangi Te Aorere, as touched on by the Minister, there was submissions made around the mandated post-settlement governance entity, Ngāti Rangi Te Aorere Koromatua Council, exercising the votes on behalf of absentee landowners. Now, one submitter, Kiri Pōtaka Jews, opposed that action. And on the other side, that esteemed Māori lawyer, Donna Hall, requested that the bill be amended to allow the post-settlement governance entity to hold the mana for those owners and exercise those voting rights. Now, it is really a can of worms, and that's why it's good that that has led to a review taking place now of the Te Ture Whenua Māori Act, so that the shares of, because currently the shares of absentee owners are administered by the Māori trustee, and to actually allow another entity to take on those rights would require changes to the Te Ture Whenua Māori Act. So that Act is currently being reviewed, and there's discussions taking place around other entities such as post-settlement governance entities looking after the rights of absentee landowners. So we do commend that, and we look forward to maybe seeing a Te Ture Whenua amendment bill coming through this House, although with the election date, is it? Complete rewrite. Ooh. Well, looking forward to that then. And who knows, it may be introduced in this parliamentary term. Oh, we look forward to that, Minister. So that's a good development that has taken place as a result of the submissions on this bill, sir. There was one submission regarding the low amount of commercial redress compared to what other tribes are getting, and that is a common submission that we do here, sir, and it is very valid, because I understand the commercial redress for Rangi Te Aorere is something in the vicinity of $750,000 after 175 years of whatever grievances that they have held. They have settled for a princely sum of $750,000. Now, sir, you don't need a degree in quantum mathematics to figure out that there's not much cash in the treaty pūtea. And I know the Minister is probably doing his best trying to fight for some more pūtea there. But sir, I am reminded of this country's biggest fraud trial currently taking place in the courts, where Bill English had plenty of pūtea back then for that great tribe of the South Island, the Ngāti South Canterbury Finance, and the many hapu of investors of that tribe. It was not a problem then to find $1.2 billion for Ngāti SCF. That's $1,200 million for those to bail out that company, which is now the subject of the biggest fraud trial. And then I contrast that with Rangi Te Aorere, $750,000 to settle all of their historic treaty treaty grievances. And Sir, that submitter is right. They aren't getting enough. And so we'd hope that the Minister will do his bit and show a bit more pūtea for a lot of these iwi that are in the treaty settlement pipeline. Mr Speaker, I want to turn to Ngāti Rangi Wewehi. There are a few submissions, but one kaupapa that took my interest, and that was the manuscripts of Wiremu Mahi Te Rangi Kāheke and the issue of intellectual property rights. Now, Sir, much of the country's early Māori history and knowledge about art, spirituality and myths comes from the collections of early colonial writings, most notably the work of Sir George Grey. But Grey was he was a collector of stories who edited the works and then took the credit for the works. However, these works were really the work of Māori who had reading and writing ability, thanks to the influence of men, largely missionaries, such as Selwyn, Williams and Hadfield. Men such as Martine Te Whiti and Taonui up in the north and Te Rangi Kāheke were the unacknowledged gatherers of information in manuscript form. Now, Rangi Wewehi sought acknowledgement for Te Rangi Kāheke for the work he'd done. It is, Mr Speaker, a matter of intellectual property rights. The Rangi Kāheke manuscripts followed the old Governor Grey around the world until in the 1920s the manuscripts found their way back to Aotearoa and have since been held in the George Grey collection in the Auckland City Library. And it was the hope that the manuscripts could be repatriated to the Rotorua Museum of Art and History, but Auckland Library were unwilling to do this. Now, there have been discussions between those two institutions and Rangi Wewehi of the possibility of some sort of arrangement that will enable the manuscripts to be put on display in Rotorua, but in the meantime, the Crown in this bill will acknowledge the influence Te Rangi Kāheke had on the writings of Sir George Grey. And it's a matter of intellectual property rights and giving recognition where it's due, and I hope we'll see more examples of this recognition as other tribes negotiate their settlements also. And finally, Mr Speaker, I just want to touch on the people of Tapuika. Tapuika Iwi Authority asked the committee to include in their settlement a school site, Te Kura Kaupapa Māori o Te Matai, to be vested in them. Long story short, Sir, the site is not available, unfortunately, to Tapuika. The Crown has been in negotiations and has done a settlement with the Waitaha tribe since 2008. And so several school sites in the Te Puke region township have already been used in other negotiations. And the land at Te Kura Kaupapa Māori o Te Matai has, however, been offered back, but on an RFR basis to Tapuika. And they have agreed to that. So in finishing, Mr Speaker, I mihi to the members of Ngā Punawai o Te Tokotoru, the three iwi there, the Three Springs. It's a fine name, sir, that references the geothermal nature of the land that these three cousins belong to. And that is a constant theme that I like to integrate into my speeches, sir, that it is through understanding the whakapapa and the genealogy is to understand the Māori history. And the whole of our history is because of whakapapa, and the more one understands those finer threads, the more detail which is available to students of Māori history and indeed the history of our country. And with those words, sir, I commend this bill to the House. Kia ora.
Kia ora, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Dr Peter Sharples.
Kia ora, Mr. Speaker.